The NFL season is less than 80 days away, and so we got notes, and we got some stuff we got to talk about. Like, first off, Leighton Vander Esch, the Cowboys linebacker, is moving back to weak side linebacker. Now, this happens because the Cowboys have a very interesting scenario where they have almost an embarrassing amount of riches at the linebacker position. Michael Parsons, Jalen Smith, Leighton Vander Esch. You then go on the bottom, you see Jabril Cox and Keanu O'Neal. That's 5 guys. How are they going to use them is going to be interesting. But it's still 5 guys. So, okay, you go back to weak side linebacker because that's what you were good at. So let's move you back there. Let's do this, and let's move them all around. And using all their abilities to their advantage because, let's face it, according to Mike McCarthy, there is no such thing as really a weak side linebacker. It's more of a DPR, a designated pass rusher. So, and according to numerous insiders, they said that, well, Michael Parsons started at middle linebacker, but they're moving him all over the place. They're putting him at that that designated pass rusher position, but they can move him all over the place. So it does give the Cowboys some flexibility. Stephen Gidry, the wide receiver we told you about that was released by the Cowboys when they brought in Reggie Davis, was put on the IR. This obviously he had got hurt at some period of time, and the Cowboys were like, hey, he's hurt, let's put him on the IR, the injured reserve, and let's bring in somebody who can take his place or do his job better. And that's what they did. They brought in Reggie Davis. Now, I'm not saying that he is better, but that is the way it usually works. You have a day or 2 days, and then he can be put on the IR if the team so chooses. More news on the Cowboys. The Cowboys are going to Oxnard, California. This will be 31st year, I believe, going to Oxnard. They've either spent the whole training camp in Oxnard, or they've spent a portion of training camp in Oxnard for about those 30 years. And it's going to be full capacity. It's not just going to be media members. It's going to be fans, in which the Cowboys do some special things. They have some people come, some of their legends, Jerry Jones talks, Stephen Jones, and a few others talk. They have like two ceremonial days before they do training camp, which will be on the 22nd of July. Moving on into more NFL stuff, the NFL and the NFLPA, particularly the NFL Players Association, have agreed to COVID-19 protocols for the 2021 preseason, regular season, postseason, as well as training camp protocols, which would basically be, if you're vaccinated, you have no restrictions. You can do whatever. If you're unvaccinated, you can't. You're so limited. And this is the NFL's way of saying, hey, you want to do all this stuff, you have to be vaccinated. If you're not, you can't do it. Very simple. So I divided it up into vaccinated people versus unvaccinated people in terms of what they can do. For vaccinated people, you don't need to have daily testing. Masks are not required in facilities or in travel with team. No social distance, but that has to be with players who are, or people who are vaccinated. And that could be just fans, players, people in general. No quarantine required if you're in a high-risk exposure. No travel restrictions. You could have family, you could stay there. No restrictions, as I said before. No social on social media, and also marketing, sponsorships, opportunities, can use saunas and steam rooms, may interact with fully vaccinated family members and friends during team travel. But as you expect, unvaccinated people have all these restrictions, as they have to test every day, mask in facility, travel, must stay socially distanced, must quarantine at high risk exposure situations, travel restrictions, 15 players allowed in the weight room, where there's no restrictions with that for any of these players who are vaccinated. Must stay socially distanced in cafeteria, where if you're a vaccinated person, that's not the case. Can't eat with anybody. Staff, if they're not vaccinated, have to just grab and go. They can't sit down. There, no social media, no social, no media, no marketing, no sponsorship activities permitted. Can't use saunas or steam rooms. Also, can't be in the same hotel. Can't be in the same hotel room with a vaccinated person. Can't eat in a restaurant. May not interact with anyone outside of the team travel. Moving on, Justin Fields will not be the starter week 1. We heard about this, but then it was still like, oh, he's impressing. Matt Nagy went on the Chris Collinsworth podcast, in which he said, basically, Andy's the guy, and he played this very well, suggesting that he would go into a podcast with an analyst, a guy who calls games, and he will see week 1. So it's very interesting playing field. But they know, oh, let's do this. We can get away with this. And so that's what they've been doing. Andy Dalton is going to be the starter, as that was reported when he signed, or 2 days after he signed, that he would be QB1, which everyone felt was a little premature, because I felt they didn't give Nick Foles an opportunity to battle him, or Justin Fields an opportunity to battle him, or anyone else to battle him. They just said, hey, Andy Dalton, you come here, you'll be the starter. I get it. He played 7 of the 9 games that he was in. I get that. I understand. So about 7, 8 games, 9, maybe at most, I believe it was 9 games he played, and he didn't wow anybody. I mean, I guess the game he did wow some people was the game against Philadelphia, which was week 16, but that doesn't say too much. And so he will be the starter. Justin Fields will be the backup. But I think this is a way for Nagy to go and say, hey, I want to stay with my job for another year. And Page, the general manager, Page, wants to do the same thing. I understand that. Because if you don't start Justin Fields right away, there's nothing really thrown on you except you didn't start Justin Fields right away. If you didn't, since you didn't have a good year, you didn't start Justin Fields, it would have been better. But if you would start him right away and throw him in the fire and it didn't work, you're out of here kind of thing. So it was a very interesting situation. Jaguars sign wide receiver Laquan Treadwell, the former first-round pick of the Minnesota Vikings, back, I believe, in 2015. He tried out for the Jaguars in minicamp, and I just want the Jaguars to do Hard Knocks, because I think that would be so entertaining. You have Tim Tebow, you have Urban Meyer, you have Trevor Lawrence, you have all these guys. Let's just see it at this point, because I understand, like, oh, the Cowboys are, but it's it's not the same. You have to understand. You have one of the best coaches in college football history going to coach in the NFL for the first time, and then you have a rookie quarterback who was drafted #1, who's going to be the starter, and then you have a first-year tight end who was a starting quarterback in the NFL one period of time, Tim Tebow, who also played baseball and was an analyst for everything. And that, you just want to see this. This would be amazing to watch. But we'll just have to wait and see. That has not come out as of yet. The NFL suspended 49ers defensive lineman Jordan Willis for 6 games without pay due to violating the PED law that is in the NFL rulebook, which is the performance enhancing substance/drug abuse in the NFL. And this is not Jordan Willis' first time. About a year, 2-3 years ago, he was suspended before, and he was suspended for, I believe, 2 to 3 games. And so this is like, okay, this is your second strike. If you do it again, we're talking a whole year now. So, it's more, be careful, because if you keep doing this, you can get suspended. Potentially significant. Now, I trimmed this down. Ian Rappaport tweeted out and showed it everywhere. He said potentially very significant. I shortened it to potentially significant, as the Bears submitted a bid on purchasing Arlington International Racecourse, which leads people to say, well, are they leaving Soldier Field? And I hope not. Everyone says that when they go play in Chicago, anytime they go play in Chicago, whether it's the first time, the last time, everything, they say it's such a different atmosphere. Ray Lewis said one time that how he ended up tearing his hamstring in the game, but a week before he had got hurt on his hamstring, and it was very ginger. But he wasn't expected to play, but they were going to Chicago, and he walked on Soldier Field, and it was cold. And he's like, I'm playing. I don't care what you say, I'm playing. It's Soldier Field, I'm playing. And he ended up getting hurt. But the point is, you can't leave Chicago at this point. You can't do it. And if you watch the Pat McAfee show, the resident Bears fan was saying how, basically, Zito was saying how that George Halas, who was owner of the team, who was the general manager of the team, who was the head coach of the team at one point in time, was rolling in his grave. Was rolling over in his grave. And that's a great saying. Because it is true in a lot of ways that he is rolling over in his grave. Because it's just something like, the Bears, they shouldn't leave Soldier Field. That's where they've been. They've won a Super Bowl. They were at Soldier Field. That's what this means. It's such a big thing. And the Chicago mayor obviously took some shots at the Chicago Bears front office for saying that this would be a ridiculous move. It makes no sense. I get it. But there's an interesting thing. If the Bears move and they go and get this, do they become the Arlington Bears instead of the Chicago Bears? It's kind of like the scenario where the Cowboys were in about in 2009, 2010, when they moved from Dallas Stadium to Arlington to their new stadium in AT&T Stadium. So it's a very interesting scenario. But I hope it doesn't happen so they don't leave Chicago, because that's where they belong. And finally, because we have a few minutes left, I will talk about this. And I've hid myself from this. I didn't want to talk about it, but I ended up saying, you know what, it's time. Let's try and clear it some air at this point. Britt Reed, the son of Andy Reid, who was in the car accident the week of the Super Bowl, pled not guilty on a DWI. He was drunk, supposedly to the officer who arrested him and hit a car that had two kids, two girls, in the back seat. One was, I believe, one was 7 and the other one was age 5, and the 5-year-old had to go to the hospital. They both went to the hospital, but the 5-year-old was put in the hospital. So and to say, well, I'm gonna plead not guilty, and go and say, hey, I didn't do anything wrong. I wasn't drunk. You're in a very interesting situation at this point. Because if they prove you were drunk, now we got a guy facing time, obviously. But I believe he also got a breathalyzer test. And the officer said he was drunk. So, which was proven, he's like, I did drink a little bit. So it's like, but to say I'm not drunk, it makes no sense. But even if he was sober, now you have kids that got hurt. It makes no sense. But what do you guys think? Do you think Britt Reed should be guilty for the DWI charge, or should he be not guilty? You decide.